අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computer සහ data දීමනා.
වැඩිම ආරක්ෂාව අඩුම මිලකට. කෙටයක් රුපියල් 54යි.
Tonight, Triple Team. The President appoints a 3-member advisory group to help Sri Lanka navigate its way out of its economic storm. Time to proceed. The Supreme Court allows petitions to be heard against the emergency declaration as former Central Bank Governor Cabral gets hit with a travel ban. Alarm bells. Tea exporters warn of a major market share loss as apparel exporters call for political unity.
If we do not do this as a matter of urgency, the economic collapse we are facing as a country will be something we have never seen before.
Tumbling down. The rupee passes the ruble to become the worst performing currency with a 32% year-to-date drop as Moody's warns of financing difficulties. All this and much more coming up on First at 9 this Thursday, the 7th of April 2022.
Introducing New Hellmann's, the world's #1 mayonnaise brand now in Sri Lanka.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Bringing you the latest current events from across the island, this is First at 9 and I'm David Ebert. In Parliament today, former Justice and Finance Minister Ali Sabri called for the opposition to gather with the government to ensure stability is ensured in the country, warning that if things continue to go the way they are right now, there won't be a state left for any party to govern. He warned that urgent steps are needed to prevent Sri Lanka from becoming the next Lebanon. Meanwhile, Samagi Janabalawegaya parliamentarian Dr. Harsha De Silva called for steps to be taken to appoint an international accounting firm to probe the secondary market bond auctions and find out who really earned up to 200 to 300% profits from government funds.
අපි මේකට වඩා වෙනස් විදියට බලන්නට ඕන. මම හිතනවා අපිට තියෙන ඔප්ෂන් කීපයක්. විදේශ විනිමය කොහොමද ගෙන්න ගන්න? අපිට ගෙවන්න තියෙන ඩොලර් හිඟයට කොහොමද අර්බුදයට කොහොමද විසඳුම් හොයාගන්න? ජූලි මාසයේදී අපිට එනවා බිලියනයක ඩොලර් බිලියනයක ගෙවීමක් කරන්න ISB එක. ඒක කොහොමද අපි රීස්ට්‍රක්චර් කරන්නේ? ඒකට IMF එකට යෑම මිසක මට පේන විසඳුමක් නැහැ. World Bank එකත් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරනවක මිසක අපිට පේන විසඳුමක් නැහැ. ADB එකත් එක්ක bridging finance එකක් ගැනීම සඳහා යම්කිසි වැඩපිළිවෙලක් කරනවා මිසක වෙනම පේන විසඳුමකුත් නැහැ. ඒ හින්දා මම හිතනවා රට අස්ථාවර වෙනකොට රට ඇතුලේ පාලනයක් නැතිකොට රටේ වගකීන අමාත්‍යවරයෙක් නැතිකොට කවුරු එක්කද IMF එක සාකච්ඡා කරන්නේ? කවුරු එක්කද World Bank එක සාකච්ඡා කරන්නේ? කවුරු එක්කද ADB එක සාකච්ඡා කරන්නේ? කවුද රීස්ට්‍රක්චර් කිරීම සඳහා ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් කන්සල්ටන්ට් පත් කරන්නේ? කවුද රීස්ට්‍රක්චර් කිරීම සඳහා නීති උපදේශක පත් කරන්නේ? එහෙනම් මම ඉතාමත්ම ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ ඔබතුමන්ලාගෙන් මේ සත්‍ය තේරුම් ගන්නට ඕන. මේ සත්‍ය තේරුම් අරගෙන අපි නැවතත් ආරාධනා කරනවා. අපිට මේ කිසිම පෝස්ට් එකක් අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. ඒකෙන් ලැබෙන දෙයක්වත් නැහැ. අර මට මතකයි ඒ කාලේ අලේ මෝලාන මැතිතුමා කියනවා තැල්ල බඳින්නත් බෙල්ල තියෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා. බෙල්ල ගහලා ගියොත් තැල්ල බඳින්න බෑ. එහා සමානයි. ඔබතුමාට ආණ්ඩු කරන්නත් ඔබතුමන්ලාට මේ ආණ්ඩුව කරන්නත් එහෙම නැත්නම් ඔබතුමාට මේ ආර්ථිකය හදන්නත් මේ රට ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න. මේ රට විනාශ වෙලා ගියොත් මේ රටේ ආර්ථිකය කඩාකප්පල් වුණොත් නැවත අවුරුදු කීයකට ආපස්සට යයිද කියන එක අපි හැමෝම දන්නවා. අපි සියලු දෙනාම දන්නවා ලෙබනනයට මොනවද වුනේ කියන එක. ලෙබනනයක් නොවීම සඳහා අපි වග බලාගත යුතුයි. ඒ වග බලා ගැනීමේ ක්‍රියාපටිපාටි හා වගකීම විශේෂයෙන්ම ගාම් ආණ්ඩුවට තියෙනවා කියන එක අපි පිළිගන්නවා. හැබැයි ඒ හා සමාන වගකීම, ඒ හා සමාන හෝ ඊට නොදැවෙනි වගකීම ඔබතුමන්ලාටත් තියෙනවා.
අපේ භාණ්ඩාගාරයට ආදායමක් නැහැ. මම නම කියලාම කියන්නම් රාණි ජයමහා මැතිණිය කිව්වා මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ පටන් ගත්තේ බදු කපා හැරීම නිසා. ඒ බදු කපා හැරීම වැරදි කියලා මෙතන අපි තර්ක කරා. අපි කිව්වා නැවතත් මංගල සමරවීර යුගයේ තිබිච්ච බදු එතනට බැරි නම් ඒ කිට්ටුවට හරි යන්න. රටක් බදු නැතුව දුවන්න බෑ. අපේ රට තමයි ලෝකේ අඩුම දළදේශ නිෂ්පාදනයට සාපේක්ෂව බදු ලැබෙන රට. ප්‍රේමදාස මහත්තයා ජනාධිපති වෙලා ඉන්න කාලේ දළදේශ නිෂ්පාදනයෙන් 120කට කිට්ටු වෙන බදු තිබුණා. හැබැයි මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිවරයා අස් වෙලා 2015 ආණ්ඩුව ගන්නකොට එය 109ට විතර බහැලා තිබුණා. මංගල සමරවීර මුදල් ඇමතිවරයා ඉවත් වෙනකොට 112 මාරට විතර නැගලා තිබ්බා. අද 108ට වඩා අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. විපක්ෂ නායකතුමා ඇතුළු අපි සියලු දෙනාම කිව්වා ඔය බදු ප්‍රතිපත්තිය වැරදි. ඒක තමයි මේකට මුල. ඒ නිසා මේ බදු සංශෝධන කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. දෙවැනි කාරණාව තමයි ණය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීම. දැන් ඔබතුමා කියනවා ජූලි මාසේ ඩොලර් බිලියනයක් ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා. අපි කොහොමද මේක ගෙවන්නේ? ඔබතුමා හොඳටම දන්නවා අපි කිව්වා ඩොලර් මිලියන 500 ගෙවන එක සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඊට වඩා හිතන්න තිබුණා. එදා ඩොලර් මිලියන 500 අතේ තියාගත්තා නම් අඩු ගානේ කිරිපිටි ටික බෙහෙත් ටික ගේන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක කිව්වා. ඒක අපි විතරක් නෙමෙයි ඔබතුමා නම් කරා ආර්ථික විශේෂඥයෝ 3 දෙනෙක් ගැන ඉන්ද්‍රජිත් කුමාරස්වාමී මහතුමා කිව්වා. ශාන්ත දේවරාජන් මහතුමා කිව්වා. ශාමිනී කුරේ මැතිණිය කිව්වේ නැති වුණාට ඒ කට්ටියත් ඒ අදහසේමයි හිටියේ. සබ්රි අමතුමා ඔබට මතකද? මම ඔබට රෑ කෝල් එකක් දුන්නා. රෑ කෝල් එකක් දීලා මං කිව්වා සබ්රි we are having a serious situation. I told you look at who bought the bonds in the secondary market. ඇයි මේවා ගෙවන්නේ? මේවා සමහරු ඒ ගෙවපු පුද්ගලයෝ 100 200 300 ලාභ ගත්ත ඩොලර් වලින්. මම සබ්රි අමතුමාට එදා රෑ කෝල් කරලා කිව්වා I told you can't deny that because it's a fact. I propose in this house that we immediately appoint an independent accounting firm internationally to undertake a forensic audit of all what happened with those bonds and other issues.
Honourable Member, thank you very much.
The Sri Lankan government has appointed an advisory committee comprising of eminent economic and fiscal experts to provide guidance on addressing the current debt crisis and to help it engage with the International Monetary Fund this month. According to a statement issued by the President's Media Division, the Presidential Advisory Group on Multilateral Engagement and Debt Sustainability comprises of former Central Bank Governor Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, former Chief Economist of the World Bank Professor Shanta Devarajan, and former Director of the IMF's Institute of Capacity Development Dr. Shamini Kure. Among the responsibilities the advisory group will undertake are to hold discussions with Sri Lankan institutions and officials engaging with the IMF. The group is also expected to provide assistance and guidance that will address the present crisis and lead towards sustainable recovery for Sri Lanka. The surcharge tax bill presented in Parliament by the Leader of the House, Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, on the 22nd of February was passed with amendments in Parliament without a vote today. With that, a 25% surcharge tax will be charged from individuals or companies that have earned an annual taxable income of over 2 billion rupees for the year. The surcharge tax bill, which was tabled in Parliament on the 22nd of February, was passed with amendments during parliamentary sessions today. The bill was passed without a vote as the government had amended the bill as requested by the opposition. The new law will enable the government to charge a 25% windfall tax on groups of companies, individual companies, partnerships and individuals who have earned over 2 billion rupees in the year. However, in the case of a partnership, the income of a partner shall not be taken into account when calculating the taxable income of partners as an individual if the tax has been paid by the partnership on such taxable income. Further, on each company in a group of companies of which the aggregate of the taxable income of all subsidiaries is over 2 billion rupees, the 25% surcharge tax will be charged. The main objective of imposing the special tax is to raise necessary revenue to finance the government's expenditure programs for the upcoming year. Last month, the Attorney General informed the Supreme Court that the one-time surcharge tax of 25% will not include 13 retirement funds, including the EPF and the ETF. The country's main opposition, Samagi Jana Balawegaya, held protests in several areas of the island today, calling on the government to resign. Further, several public demonstrations were also held during the day. Here's a roundup of series of protests that were worked off today and yesterday. Anti-government protests that began last week have now spread island-wide, urging the government to resign due to its failure in handling the ongoing economic crisis. Today marks the 8th day of demonstrations. A protest organised by the Tamil Progressive Alliance worked off in the area of Talokale in Norelia under the patronage of opposition leader Sajid Premadasa. The main opposition, Samagi Jana Balawegaya, also held another protest in Kiribatkoda under the leadership of its parliamentarian Field Marshal Sarat Fonseca today. Further, more protests organised by SGB parliamentarians worked off today in several areas of the island. In the meantime, another public protest calling for the government's resignation was worked off near Parliament. Meanwhile, in Kurunagala yesterday, a protest organised by youth was held in the vicinity of a wine stores alleged to be owned by Minister of Highways Johnston Fernando. The protesters then marched towards the Prime Minister's coordinating office for the Northwestern Province. The protesters attempted to enter the office, however, the police prevented these attempts with the use of barriers. Also yesterday, a group of protesters demonstrated in front of the residence of Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Galle District Parliamentarian Sampath Athukorala. Now, the United Nations has welcomed the lifting of the state of emergency in Sri Lanka imposed for the maintenance of public order. Issuing a statement, United Nations Resident Coordinator in Sri Lanka, Hannah Singer Hamdi, said she is deeply saddened by the hardships Sri Lankans are enduring. She added that the UN stands by the rule of law and the right to peaceful assembly and welcomes the lifting of the state of emergency and encourages parties to work towards a peaceful resolution to the crisis that will allow for the country to focus on the urgent steps needed for economic recovery. She says that the UN stands ready to support Sri Lanka with all its agencies, funds and programs and the good officers of the UN, the statement added. And we'll be back with more stories right after this short break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. The Colombo Magistrates Court has issued an order preventing former Central Bank Governor Ajit Niwad Cabral from leaving the country. The order was given by Colombo Additional Magistrate Harshana Kaknawala when an application filed by former Uva Province Governor Kirti Tennakoon was taken up today. The application has charged Cabral of abusing public funds during his tenure at the helm of the central bank. Further, the former central bank governor has also been issued summons to appear in court on the 18th of this month. President's Counsel Maitri Gunaratna and Attorney at Law Gunaratna Vaninaika appeared on behalf of the plaintiff. The Supreme Court has granted leave to proceed with 4 fundamental rights petitions filed challenging the extraordinary gazette notification issued by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa under the Public Security Act earlier this week. Notice has been issued to the respondents named in the petition to file their objections before the 20th of May. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa issued a Gazette Extraordinary declaring a nationwide public emergency on the 1st of April and later imposed a 36-hour curfew ahead of planned anti-government protests over the economic crisis in the country. The emergency rule ordinance was revoked as of midnight on the 5th of April. The government later assured that the emergency regulations and curfew had been invoked with the sole intention of ensuring peace and safety of the public and private properties. In response to this, 4 fundamental rights petitions were filed in the Supreme Court challenging the extraordinary gazette notification and seeking a ruling that the emergency regulations issued by the President under the Public Security Act violates the fundamental rights of the people guaranteed by the Constitution. The Supreme Court subsequently granted leave to proceed with the petitions and issued notice on the respondents named in the petition to file their objections. Secretary to the President Gamini Senarath, Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratna, Secretary to the Ministry of Public Security Major General Jagat Dayas, the Telecommunications Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka, the IGP and the Attorney General were among those named as respondents. Accordingly, the bench ordered that if there were any objections to the petitions, they should be filed on or before the 20th of May, and any counter-objections, if any, should be filed on the 3rd of June. The petitions are to be called for hearing on the 15th of July. The Joint Apparel Association Forum is warning of serious economic consequences if political parties continue to remain divided on solutions to the country's crisis. Speaking to AdaDerana English News today, JAAF General Secretary Johan Lawrence predicts that apparel exports could see a massive 25 to 35% drop this month if no solution to the diesel shortages are found. With the country's crisis continuing to affect all segments of the Sri Lankan economy, the country's main export earner, the apparel industry, is urging all stakeholders to put aside differences and work together to resolve the current crisis, which has imposed severe hardship on people and hampered the economy. The industry warns that if the current macroeconomic crisis continues for longer without any urgent action being taken to address it, the social and economic consequences imposed upon Sri Lanka's people will be incalculable. The Joint Apparel Association Forum says that the government's inaction in finding and implementing a constructive solution to the current crisis urgently risks the imposition of potentially heavy costs the country will continue to pay over the long term, including access to global markets. In a statement, the JAAF says that with the current crisis having been brewing for several months, the government's procrastination in finding solutions has created considerable hardship for ordinary people, while power and fuel outages have already led to the shutdown of many small establishments and escalated the cost of production for others. It also warns that the crisis is currently hurting Sri Lanka's international reputation as a reliable sourcing destination and exporter, while buyers of the country's merchandise exports, investors and business partners are getting worried.
The apparel industry is at crisis stage. The shortages of diesel are now beginning to affect every single factory to the point where we will start seeing factories being unable to operate. We require diesel not only for our generators, but also to transport staff and to transport our goods. The unavailability of diesel is hitting factories, particularly in the SME sector. We foresee that as soon as factories return to work after the April holidays, a number of these SME factories will not be able to operate simply because they do not have diesel. Unless this situation is urgently arrested, we see a 25 to 30% drop in exports in the month of April. JAAF makes an urgent call out to all political parties, to all stakeholders, to put aside their differences and come together to resolve the current crisis that's hitting the economy. If we do not do this as a matter of urgency, the economic collapse we are facing as a country will be something we have never seen before. We urgently need to expedite the discussions with the International Monetary Fund to arrange the restructuring of debt, to pause the payment of debt, and to put in the structural reforms that are needed. We welcome the new governor of the central bank. We know that discussions with the IMF are key on his priority, and this is an absolute essential that we bring this together. Working with the IMF will help us ensure at this difficult time that we have a path that sets a path of growth for the country and a path of recovery. We understand that there will be tough times still ahead, but we do need to get on this journey as urgently as possible. The industry and the country face a crisis like never before, and it is absolutely imperative that the powers that be get together and work out an urgent solution so we can prevent the country from going into a complete economic collapse.
Tea exporters are worried about a loss of global market share due to several factors currently hindering growth. They say that production remains low due to fertilizer-related issues, while ongoing power cuts too have affected their tea production plans. The cost of production has also increased due to the rise in fertilizer costs as well, as power and fuel shortages have combined to this as well. Further, they are also calling on the government to negotiate a free trade agreement with Russia to prevent a loss of market share to India, Vietnam and China. At a time when the country is finding solutions to tackle an ongoing economic crisis, tea exporters are worried about several issues which they believe will lead to the loss of market share and ultimately a loss in export income. Last year, tea export income was $1.1 billion and the industry is now aiming at achieving $1.5 billion this year. They also cite a 4.7 million kilogram year-on-year reduction in tea yields in the first 2 months due to the unavailability of fertilizer as a major point of concern. According to tea exporters, production in the first 2 months in this year was 41 million kilograms, while it was 45.7 million kilograms last year. Further, exporters estimate a 65 million kilogram tea production output for the first quarter of 2022, which is also a 10% reduction when compared with the first quarter levels of last year. The 3 to 4-fold rise in fertilizer prices have also made tea growers unable to afford them as well. Due to low production volumes, exporters estimate a reduction of export incomes by 8 to 10% in the first quarter of this year. In the meantime, regular power cuts and non-availability of fuel to operate generators have also affected the industry. They say that factories are unable to operate tea packing machines that usually operate in 2 to 3 shifts per day, at least for a single shift due to the power cuts. The exporters also say that value-added tea has been affected the most due to the power cuts, and brand owners are facing a huge challenge in fulfilling their contractual obligations to foreign buyers. What's more, the fuel issue has also affected the transportation of tea to Colombo for auction. Exporters say that the escalation of transport costs along with high auction prices have negatively impacted the competitiveness of Ceylon tea in the global market. On the other hand, exporters are also concerned about the current forex shortage, which has made their suppliers of tea packaging materials unable to import. They say that packaging material suppliers face issues in securing the required quantities and added that banks do not prioritize opening letters of credit for importation. Meanwhile, rupee depreciation and non-availability of tea at sufficient quantities has resulted in a rise in Colombo tea auction prices. Although they say that this price rise has temporarily mitigated the adverse impact of sanctions on Russia in the Colombo tea auction prices, tea exports to Ukraine have been affected due to disruptions in the shipping and other logistics arrangements. Exporters also highlighted the agreement between India and Russia to carry out their trading business using the rupee and the ruble that has been stated in media reports. According to their view, the agreement will enable Indian tea exporters to continue to supply tea to the Russian market at the expense of Sri Lanka and some other suppliers. China and Vietnam, meanwhile, who also do not accept US and EU sanctions on Russia, will also continue with their tea supplies to the Russian market. With this being the case, tea exporters also request the government to explore the possibility of having a special trading arrangement with Russia to safeguard the important Russian market for Ceylon tea. Meanwhile, in the backdrop where the country's tourism industry has started to improve in its arrivals, various factors such as anti-government protests and the forex shortage could possibly hurt the sector's performance. To add to this, the US Department of State has issued an advisory to its citizens, urging them to reconsider their travel to Sri Lanka as the country is affected by an economic crisis. Due to relaxed COVID restrictions and better control of COVID-19 in the country, tourism arrivals have spiked, showing signs of resilience in the sector that was heavily affected by the pandemic. Last month, tourism arrivals exceeded the 100,000 mark for the first time since the pandemic began in 2020. Between the 1st of March and the 29th, a total of 101,192 tourists have arrived in Sri Lanka. This is a near 5,000 arrival improvement when compared to the month of February, where 96,507 arrivals were recorded. At a time when the country's tourism industry has started to show some growth, several factors that have the potential to affect this positivity are now visible. One factor is the forex shortage that has made the importation of LP gas as well as fuel difficult. Recently, hotel operators during a protest said that they are unable to operate due to the shortage of LP gas and fuel. Further, the ongoing anti-government protests also possess the potential to hurt the growth performance of the tourism industry, as the tourists can revoke their plans to enjoy their holidays in Sri Lanka due to the prevailing political instability. What's more, there were media reports quoting Sri Lankan hotel executives that 5-star hotels in Colombo saw cancellations and deferrals from groups of travellers, as Indian tourists who were supposed to arrive in Colombo last weekend changed their plans due to the state of emergency and the curfew that was imposed to prevent the staging of protests. In this backdrop, the United States has also warned the citizens about travelling to Sri Lanka. Issuing a travel advisory, the US Department of State calls on its citizens to reconsider travel to Sri Lanka due to COVID-19 and fuel and medicine shortages. It says that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued a Level 3 travel health notice for Sri Lanka due to COVID-19, indicating a high level of COVID-19 in the country. It also says that the country is experiencing shortages of fuel, cooking gas, as well as some medicines and essential food items due to the ongoing economic situation in the country. The US Department of State has also highlighted the country's ongoing protests, planned power outages, and limitation of public transportation due to the unavailability of fuel as well. The Public Utilities Commission has approved reduced power cuts for the weekend, with 2-hour power interruptions on both Saturday, the 9th of April, and Sunday, the 10th. On Saturday, areas A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and L will experience 2-hour power cuts between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. Power cuts for 2 hours between 3 p.m. and 10 p.m. will occur in the areas of P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, and W. Meanwhile, on Sunday, the 10th of April, all these areas will have 1-hour power cuts between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. Until tomorrow, the country will experience 6 hours and 30 minutes due to low fuel supplies in power plants. Sri Lanka's rupee has earned the distinction of being the worst performing currency in the world at the present, even beating out the Russian ruble. Having dropped by a staggering 32% year to date, all hopes lie with tomorrow's monetary policy announcement with newly appointed Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe. The Sri Lankan rupee has plunged to a record low to become the world's worst performing currency as the country struggles to contain a worsening economic and political crisis. The rupee was hovering near 300 rupees to the US dollar yesterday, down 32% year to date and lags behind the Russian ruble. The country's central bank governor Ajit Niwad Cabral, who was scheduled to oversee a policy meeting today, also resigned on Monday, along with newly appointed Finance Minister Ali Sabri, leaving the country without officials to head its monetary policy matters. Sri Lanka is expected to begin talks with the International Monetary Fund this month, as newly appointed Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe arrived in the country today to take over the position. He is expected to announce the country's monetary policy tomorrow evening at the central bank. Concerns have heightened over the country's ability to secure help from the IMF to avoid defaulting on looming international bond payments. The country's opposition, meanwhile, has been urging the government to also seek out assistance from the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank as well to help it balance out its short-term financing needs. Welcome back. Ratings agency Moody's Investor Services warns that prolonged political uncertainty in the country due to the financial crisis could stifle the island's attempts to source external financing from key development partners. Ratings agency Moody's Investor Services has warned that prolonged political uncertainty and the ongoing financial crisis in Sri Lanka could thwart attempts to obtain external financing from key development partners. In its latest report on Sri Lanka, it adds that protracted political uncertainty is likely to hinder progress in obtaining external financing from key development partners or attracting foreign direct investment, or both, because of Sri Lanka's reliance on capital inflows to repay its sizable foreign currency obligations. Citing Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserves of around $2 billion at the end of February 2022, Moody's says that this was well below the government's annual external debt repayments of $6 billion to $7 billion through to at least 2025 and covering less than 2 months of imports. It observes that very low foreign exchange reserves have led to broad restrictions on imports and shortages of several essential items such as fuel and milk powder. The report also cites Sri Lanka's inflation levels, which rose to double digits in November 2021 and reached 17.5% year-on-year in February 2022, and adds that Russia's military conflict with Ukraine also exacerbates Sri Lanka's external difficulties through a higher energy and food import bill. It also warns that higher inflation is likely to prompt further policy rate hikes, which will raise government borrowing costs and further weaken debt affordability. Meanwhile, at the Colombo Bourse, the all-share price index fell by 331.23 points to end at 8,249.7 today. Meanwhile, the S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks ended at 2,668 points, falling a 129-point loss. Share volumes, meanwhile, were 72 million, while market turnover was 1.4 billion rupees. The transport sector was the top contributor to turnover, while the food, beverage and the tobacco sectors were second. Foreign purchases amounted to 111 million rupees, while foreign sales were 52 million rupees. Foreign participation in the market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net buyers. And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We hope you join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.